Welcome back, listeners, to the BizBlend, the podcast where we decode business growth, mindset, and strategy. I'm your host, Sana, as always, and today we are joined by Gregory Shepard. Let me introduce a bit about him. So, he's a serial entrepreneur, investor, and also author of the Startup Life Cycle. Now, hear me out, listeners. Greg has built and sold not one, not two, not three, 12 companies. And he's here to share the real roadmap of scaling from idea to exit with all of us. So let's quickly dive into this exciting episode. So, Greg, welcome to the show. And I can't wait to dive deep into our conversation today with you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the kind words. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay. So let's talk about your book, Greg. So in the life cycle, I mean, generally also if we see, you break the startup journey into clear phases in there. So from your experience, I mean, you have built and sold 12 companies. Which phase do you think most of the founders underestimate, and why, or maybe what's the hidden trap there? What kind of monster is hiding under the bed in there?
Well, I mean, the research I did took about 5 years, and in that, we found that about 47.1% of founders fail in the first 18 months. And then the rest of the founders fail over the following 5 years for mostly decisions they made in the first 18 months. So the first 18 months is critical. Now, in terms of where that sits in the life cycle, it
Mm.
depends on how fast they go through the stages, but typically that time period accounts for the vision stage, the product stage, and the go-to-market stage. This is usually where they make the most mistakes.
Mm. No. And is it because in the early stage the founders are mostly obsessed with the fundraising, or or maybe scaling, or expanding, or heavily investing on marketing? I mean, what's the exact reason in there?
No, it's not really that's not really the reason. It's interesting, what I found is that the reason had to do with bad decisions. Bad decisions based off bad advice, and the bad advice was actually coming from investors primarily. Came from investors, other founders, accelerator program managers, mentors, and those people are meant to help them. So the
Mm.
question is, why is this bad advice happening? It's not happening out of malice. They're not giving bad advice intentionally, obviously. They see that each of these different personas see the world differently. So each of them have a lens on their eyes. An investor sees it from their perspective. And they also have their own motivations. So each party is motivated to achieve their objectives, which
Mm.
may not always align with the founder's objectives. Another thing to realize is that I think a lot of founders, they think that the goal is to raise money. Well, that is an outcome, it's not a goal. So you can't set building a business based off of raising money. It's the other way around. You build a business, a good business, and then the money comes to you. So there's a realignment that needs to happen with founders so that they understand exactly what the priorities are, who they should be listening to, and to make sure that they pay attention to filtering the advice they get
Mhm.
based on their own experience as a practitioner in that business at that time.
And 47, 18 months. I mean, quite a staggering number out there, Craig. And I'm really curious to know. So you have had experiences with 12 companies built and then sold. What was your experience with the first one? I mean,
Oh, it was like any other founder's first one. It is a ball of stress, anxiety, unknowns. There's two things you have to know as a founder. You have to know where you are and you have to know where you're going. It's like a GPS.
Mm.
And the reason why I wrote the book is because if you think about the second most common reason, which actually blends into the first most common reason why founders fail, is that they don't understand that. So imagine in your career, in your life, or even going on holiday, if you didn't know where you were and where you were going,
Yes.
you would be going in circles forever, right? So it's the fundamental thing that founders need to know are those two items, and that's why I put the book in that way, so that you could actually see what the stages are that you go through, why founders fail at each one of the stages, what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing as they go through the startup life cycle. My intention was to give them knowledge on what's coming. A lot of founders, they're looking at their financials like investors do, and that's like driving a car looking behind you. You're going to run into something. You have to look in front of you. So when I wrote the book, the idea was, yeah, you got to look at your financials, but the financials are a result of you building your business, just like raising capital is the result of building a good business. So it's more focused on understanding what the life cycle is and what's ahead of you so you can prepare for it than looking behind you in terms of where you are and what you've learned. Those are obvious things, right? You know what you've learned. You don't know what you have yet to learn.
Mm.
So the idea of the book was to kind of give them the ability to almost step in a time machine and say, this is what's in front of me, right? So you can prepare for that. If you're going to run a marathon and building a business is a marathon, you're going to train for that marathon and you're going to build up to the endurance that you need. So but you have a training schedule, you know what you're supposed to do. Imagine trying to run a marathon without that. That's what it's like for most founders.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And another interesting, part of your kind of is what motivating you is your philosophy of altruistic capitalism, and you are really, kind of empowering the generation based on this. So, if you can share with us, I mean, how can founders weave purpose into their business model without also diluting, profit? It's like the blend of profit and purpose into there.
Yeah, there is nothing wrong with doing well by doing good, right? You can make money by doing good things. There's nothing wrong with that. What I propose is that the motivation of founders, when I look at the founders that fall off, those founders are primarily extrinsically motivated, meaning they're motivated on the outside. So they're motivated by money, power, things like this, versus intrinsic motivations, which is the kind of motivation you get when you play a game and what
Mm-hmm.
you see in sports. So I think that altruistic capitalism embraces intrinsic motivation while producing the outcome of extrinsic motivation. And it does that by considering the fact that a good business is holistically good. It's not just good financially, it's good for the people in the business and the people outside of the business. What I found in the research is that any of the founders that were motivated purely on money, those were the ones that primarily failed. And those founders that were motivated primarily on trying to create things without consideration of the other elements that are attached to a business, like the people that are working there, the customers, and the ecosystem, those founders also failed. So when you're building a business, you have to look at it more holistically. And the approach of altruistic capitalism is using the power of capitalism for altruistic outcomes organically, right? So you see this happening everywhere. You just don't realize it's happening.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. I think I'm really, really bullish on this because, especially now, we are seeing customers demand more social impact. But still, somewhere down the line, investors they still focus on returns. So, what's your balancing act here, Craig?
The returns are for the investors.
Uh-huh.
The extrinsic motivation is the investors. The intrinsic motivation is what creates the returns. That is the people that work in the business. What gets somebody to stay longer and longer at work? What gets somebody to dig in and work through the frustrations? What makes people focus so hard that they lose track of time? It's intrinsic motivation, not extrinsic motivation. So while you have to realize that the investors want that extrinsic motivation, meaning they want those returns are a result of your team working hard, doing the extra, digging in, having grit, going through the frustrations, keeping their motivations up. And all of those things are encompassed in motivations intrinsically, right? Like the idea of solving a problem, almost like it's a game, or the idea of not letting your coworker down, or the idea of building a product that helps people that you care about, or the environment, or social impact, So while you could be building a mousetrap, you're still motivated to build a better mousetrap than has ever been built before. So in that way, it's intrinsic. Now, the outcome of the best mousetrap that's ever been built is going to be revenue, and that feeds the investors.
Mm. Greg, I mean, and there's so much disruption happening right now. Uh, then economically, um, geopolitically, or maybe financially, there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of disruptions, a lot of uncertainty. So some would say that the startup life cycle, it is less predictable today, and this exit really doesn't make sense every time. I think let's work more towards sustainability over sale. So, do you believe that a structured playbook still applies here, or is it going to or becoming obsolete?
I think that no, I think the structure it's new, first of all. There wasn't a startup life cycle before I wrote the book. It was everybody was basing it off of rounds, right? So they would say, I'm at pre-seed round, I'm at seed round, I'm at series seed round, I'm
Mhm.
at A round. Those are things that happen during the life cycle. They're not the life cycle. So I believe that the startup life cycle is new and it is the evolution. And to your point about changes, geoeconomic changes and geopolitical changes, there is a
Mhm.
lot of turbulence. And on the behalf of our country in the United States, I apologize for our ridiculous president who is just unbelievable, and our unelected vice president, Elon Jerkface. Anyway, I will say that, I think that, to the point earlier, if you are building a business
Mhm.
and as the ecosystem changes, there are some things that never change, right? Like you have to have a vision. That's the first stage of the life cycle. You have to build a product. That's the second stage of the life cycle. You have to sell the product. That's the third stage of the life cycle. You have to standardize your processes and then move into optimization, and those are the next two stages. And then eventually, if you're going to sell your company, you had mentioned it's not always, people don't always want to sell their business. But if you're raising money, you're going to be selling your business. Because if you don't sell your business, you're not going to be able to return money to your investors. So they will force you to sell your business because otherwise they never get their return back. So, the exit is also an outcome of building a good business. So my point generally is like, listen, your motivation, the exit of your business, raising capital, your own financial stability, and altruistic capitalism are all based off of focusing on building a quality, holistic business, something that looks at all the different aspects of building a startup and doesn't just focus on one, which usually is just revenue. They just focus on revenue, revenue, revenue. And again, revenue is an outcome, right?
Mm.
Revenue is an outcome of sales, and sales is an outcome of marketing, and marketing is an outcome of building a good product that you can market in the first place. So I think that most people focus on the latent indicators, the lagging indicators, these things that are behind the leading indicators instead of focusing on what causes them, right? How can you change the future by changing the present? Right? So should we be focused on the future revenue or should we be focused on building a good business today?
That's a million dollar question in there to think about. And I really really liked, because that's like the fundamentals 101, that revenue is an output of this. I mean, it all starts with understanding the product, and then a marketable product, and then your marketability converts into sales. Your sales convert into revenue, and yeah, it's the fundamentals, and it never changes. That's what I believe, irrespective of the era we are within, or the conditions, or the market, the global conditions, anything. I think the fundamentals will remain same. So the startup life cycle is never going to be obsolete. That's what I also agree with you.
There may be details and aspects that will be obsolete, but the structure itself will stand the test of time because that is the organic way things actually work in a startup. It all starts with an idea, which is the vision phase, right? So, and what's the end of it? Well, you sell your business, right? If you're raising money, this book was written for growth companies that are raising money and trying to build big startups and then sell them to an acquirer at the end. So it was focused on those, not lifestyle businesses like restaurants and things like that. Although they still follow the same protocol, right? If you're building a restaurant, you have to have a vision, you have to have a product, which is your food, right? You have to have a go to market, which is how you're going to market your restaurant. You have to standardize, which is your menu and everything that has to do with your menu and how things are cooked and prepared. You have to optimize eventually, which is how you get your restaurant working smoothly, and then you go into your growth phase, right? You may never exit, but you still have to follow the same process.
Yeah. Brilliant, brilliant, Greg. So, before we wrap up, if our listeners would like to get a hold of your book, connect with you as well, what's the best way to do that?
My website is gregoryshepard.com. Startup Science is our website for founders can go in there. If you're on my website, you can click on founders and log into a platform that breaks down the book and allows you to actually find investors, grants, and more. And then I'm also in LinkedIn. The book is available everywhere. Most commonly, people buy it from Amazon or Audible if you want the audio edition.
Great. I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes. And Greg, thank you so much for this really insightful, power packed conversation. I think the, I urge, invite all of our listeners to read the Startup Life Cycle. And thank you to you, Greg, for this power packed chat.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and energy very much. Thank you.
Great. That's really great. Greg and listeners, if you are steering a startup, or you're thinking about doing, or you're dreaming of launching, the Startup Life Cycle is a must read. And to connect with Greg, I'll have all the links in the show notes for you. You can just refer to them along with this episode on your favorite podcast platform. Until then, stay tuned for more such sharp, raw conversations right here on BizBlend with your host Sana. Until next time, keep blending business with boldness and purpose. Thank you.